The moment the airplane lurched hard enough to send coffee spilling across tray tables, most passengers thought it was just turbulence. But the real jolt had already happened minutes earlier, quiet and cruel, in the narrow aisle between economy seats. A wealthy CEO, dressed in tailored confidence and impatience, had laughed under his breath at the sight of a tired single father struggling to settle his young daughter beside him. That laugh, sharp and dismissive, would soon echo in a very different way, one that would turn pride into silence and shame into awe at 30,000 feet. If you believe stories like this matter, if you believe kindness still has the power to change hearts and lives, please take a moment right now to like this video, comment, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories of second chances alive. The single dad's name was Daniel Reyes, and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. His jacket was worn thin at the elbows, his shoes scuffed from years of doing more walking than resting, and his eyes carried the kind of permanent alertness only parents who never get a break truly understand. He held his daughter Lily's hand tightly as they shuffled down the aisle, apologizing softly to strangers as he bumped knees and armrests, trying to manage a backpack, a small duffel, and a child who was fighting sleep with everything she had left. This flight wasn't a vacation, it was a necessity. Lily needed specialized medical treatment in another city, and this was the cheapest ticket Daniel could afford after selling his old motorcycle and taking extra night shifts. A few rows ahead sat Victor Harlan, CEO of a multinational tech firm, flying first class but forced to pass through economy during boarding. He had already been irritated by the delay, the cramped aisle, and the noise. When he saw Daniel fumbling with the seatbelt extender and Lily's stuffed animal falling to the floor, Victor rolled his eyes and muttered something about incompetence and people who shouldn't fly if they couldn't manage their lives. He didn't think Daniel heard him, but Lily did. She looked up at her father with confusion and hurt, and Daniel felt that familiar ache in his chest, the one that came every time he realized the world could be unkind to people who were already doing their best. Daniel didn't respond. He never did. Life had taught him that defending himself often cost more energy than it saved. Years ago, he had learned to swallow pride for the sake of survival. After leaving the Air Force, after the accident that took Lily's mother and shattered everything he thought his future would be, Daniel had focused on one thing only: keeping his daughter safe, fed, and hopeful. The medals and flight hours from his past were locked away in a box he never opened. They didn't help pay hospital bills. They didn't tuck Lily in at night. What mattered now was endurance. As the plane took off, Lily finally fell asleep, her head resting against Daniel's shoulder. He stared out the window, watching the city lights fade beneath the clouds, and allowed himself a rare moment of fear. What if the treatment didn't work? What if he failed her? The engines roared steadily, and for a fleeting second muscle memory stirred inside him. He noted the pitch, the vibration, the subtle changes in sound. Old instincts whispered, but he pushed them away. That life was over. Victor, meanwhile, reclined his seat and scrolled through emails, annoyed that the economy section behind him was louder than he liked. He prided himself on control over companies, markets, people. Disorder irritated him. The presence of people like Daniel reminded him of a past he had clawed his way out of, a past he despised. He told himself his mockery was justified, a reminder of how far he'd come. He didn't see it as cruelty, he saw it as truth. About an hour into the flight, the first real sign of trouble appeared. The plane shuddered, not violently, but unnaturally. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and the cabin crew moved with quick, practiced smiles that didn't quite hide the tension in their eyes. Daniel felt it instantly. This wasn't routine turbulence. His body stiffened, senses sharpening as the engines changed tone. Lily stirred, whimpering softly. He held her closer, whispering reassurances even as his own heart began to race. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but clipped, explaining there was a technical issue, and asking everyone to remain seated. Victor frowned, irritation flaring again. He hated uncertainty. Around him, murmurs grew, prayers whispered, hands clenched armrests. Minutes passed, heavy and slow. Then the plane dipped suddenly, more sharply than before. A scream escaped somewhere in the cabin. The overhead bins rattled. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, not in fear, but in focus. When the intercom crackled again, the tone had changed. The calm was still there, but urgency threaded through it. The captain announced that they were facing a serious mechanical failure affecting control systems and asked, almost desperately, if there was any trained fighter pilot on board who could assist. The cabin froze. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Daniel's breath caught. Every instinct he had spent years burying surged to the surface. Memories flooded back. Simulators, emergency drills, split-second decisions at supersonic speeds. His hands trembled, not from fear but from the weight of choice. He looked down at Lily, her eyes wide now, searching his face. In that moment he understood that staying silent was no longer an option. This wasn't about his past or his pride. This was about everyone on this plane, including the little girl who trusted him with her life. He raised his hand. A flight attendant hurried over, disbelief flickering across her face as Daniel quietly explained his background. She studied him for a second, taking in the worn jacket, the tired eyes, the economy seat. Doubt was there, undeniable, but desperation won. She nodded and asked him to follow. As Daniel stood, Victor saw him pass and scoffed internally, convinced this was some kind of delusion. A man like that, a hero, it seemed absurd. The walk to the cockpit felt endless. With each step, Daniel felt the weight of years fall away. The door opened, revealing the tense faces of the flight crew, sweat beading on brows, alarms blinking ominously. The captain turned, hope and skepticism colliding in his eyes. Daniel introduced himself simply, his voice steady. There was no time for resumes or explanations, only action. What followed was a blur of controlled chaos. Daniel assessed the situation with rapid precision, his mind slipping seamlessly into the role it once knew so well. He offered solutions, adjustments, alternative control methods. The crew listened, then acted. The plane lurched again, but this time there was direction behind the movement. Slowly, painfully, control began to return. Every second stretched like an eternity. Passengers prayed, some cried. Victor sat rigid, the earlier mockery replaying in his mind like a cruel echo. When the plane finally stabilized enough to begin an emergency landing, a collective sob of relief rippled through the cabin. The descent was rough, terrifying but guided. Tires hit the runway hard, sparks flying, the sound deafening. And then, impossibly, the plane slowed to a stop. Silence followed, broken only by sobs and gasps, and the overwhelming realization that they were alive. Applause erupted, raw and emotional. People hugged strangers. Flight attendants wiped tears from their eyes. Daniel remained in the cockpit for a moment longer, hands shaking now that the adrenaline had faded. When he finally returned to his seat, Lily flung herself into his arms, crying openly. He held her, whispering that everything was okay, that she was safe. Victor watched it all, his throat tight, his certainty shattered. The man he had mocked, dismissed as lesser, had just saved his life. Shame washed over him, heavy and unavoidable. For the first time in years, Victor felt truly small. As the passengers disembarked, many stopped to thank Daniel, to touch his shoulder, to call him a hero. He accepted their gratitude quietly, uncomfortably. He didn't see himself that way. He was just a father who did what needed to be done. Victor approached last, his expensive suit wrinkled, his confidence gone. He couldn't undo his earlier cruelty, but he could acknowledge it. He thanked Daniel, voice thick, and apologized. Daniel listened, nodded, and moved on. Forgiveness, like endurance, was something he had learned to give freely, not for others, but for himself. Outside the terminal, emergency vehicles flashing behind them, Daniel breathed deeply, grounding himself. Lily looked up at him with pure admiration, seeing her father not as tired or struggling, but as strong. In her eyes, he had always been that. If this story has touched your heart so far, if it has reminded you that courage often hides in quiet places and worn jackets, please take a moment to comment below and share your thoughts. Your words matter more than you know. Victor's life would change after that day. He would remember the way pride nearly blinded him, how close he came to losing everything because he forgot the humanity in others. Daniel would continue his journey with Lily, facing treatments and challenges, still tired, still determined, but now carrying a reminder that his past, his sacrifices, had meaning beyond survival. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something deep and true, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Let us know in the comments if you believe kindness and humility can still change the world, because sometimes, at 30,000 feet, it's not wealth or status that saves us, but the quiet strength of someone we almost overlooked.